The views and opinions expressed by the guests or hosts of this program do not necessarily reflect those of Divine Mercy Radio, Incorporated.
From the studios of Catholic 540 AM, Divine Mercy Radio, this is Meet the Priest. There are over 120 active diocesan and religious order priests in our listening area. Meet the Priest gives you the chance to learn more about these dedicated and interesting people.
Hello, fellow disciples. Welcome to Meet the Priest. I am your host, Mark Baratta. St. John Vianney, the patron saint of parish priests, once said that the priesthood is the love of the heart of Jesus. This show strives to bring you closer to those men in the Diocese of Raleigh, now 100 years strong, who bring Jesus to people and people to Jesus. Our guest today has accumulated quite a few stamps on his passport despite his youth. Father Nicolas Sheehy, currently Assistant Chaplain at Duke Catholic Center in Durham. Father, welcome to Meet the Priest.
Thanks so much, Mark. Really glad to be here.
You grew up the oldest of 8 children in a loving family in San Diego. Tell us about your parents and their impact on your faith. I understand by the 6th grade you were praying the rosary daily.
Yeah, that's right. My parents, thankfully I was able to grow up in a Catholic household. My dad, not so much practicing, my mom very much so. And so she really was kind of the heart and soul of the family, and she's the one who made sure that we all made it to Mass, at least on Sunday, if not during the week as well. And then I think being the oldest gave me a little bit of an idea of helping my younger brothers and sisters grow in the faith as well.
What convinced you of a priestly vocation at such a young age?
Yeah, I mean, really already when I was 8 years old, I kind of felt the call in my heart. And so I think that was just kind of there. I remember when I made my first communion, I was excited about receiving Jesus. Don't think I was thinking so much about becoming a priest yet, but probably a year or two after that, I was definitely thinking about being a priest. And so it was just kind of something that was always there on my heart. Can't think of a specific instance or a particular event. Didn't hear any voices, anything like that. But I do remember having that deep conviction that this might be something God was asking of me. And then, so when I was in 8th grade, I got to know the Legionaries of Christ, and I did a boys' retreat with them. And so then I got to know the Legionaries of Christ priests, and all throughout high school, they were a really big support. And so, like I mentioned, I was on these boys' retreats, and I would help out on these boys' retreats as a high schooler. And my senior year, the priest said, "Hey, we're going to do a retreat just for the older guys." And I thought it was going to be great because we would take these younger kids out and we'd play capture the flag. The father would always give a talk. We'd have opportunity for confessions. We'd have Mass and everything. And so we thought it was going to be like that, but without taking care of the younger kids. So we made it out for that retreat. It was right after Christmas, my senior year. And I remember in the homily to the opening Mass, Father said, "Okay, so in these 3 days of silence," and that's when we found out it was a silent retreat. And so I feel like Father kind of tricked me, but I was very appreciative. And I think that retreat really made a huge difference for me. Really taught me to pray in a much more experiential way and set up my going off to visit the house of the Legionaries of Christ and eventually joining that next summer.
They are very prevalent in this area, the Legionaries of Christ. For those that are unfamiliar, what do they believe in?
Yeah, well, I think that the things that attracted me most to the Legionaries of Christ, and I think that they still characterize us today, first of all, a passionate love for Jesus Christ. And it's something that I've always appreciated and admired. Then also, a filial love for Mary, which was also very important for me, growing up and being in so many different atmospheres. Mary has always been someone very important for me. And then a third characteristic that I would underline is always, a deep fidelity or faithfulness to the church and especially to the Holy Father, because we want to be with the church, neither a step ahead nor a step behind.
Where did your passion for the formation of young adults originate?
Well, I think I've been assigned that. It's funny. It's interesting. It's something I enjoy tremendously. Kind of a surprise. One phrase that I like is that if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I actually remember very well one of the retreats that I was helping Father Thomas with. So I was probably in 10th grade. Father Thomas was the priest who helped me all throughout high school. And I was, working on the retreat as one of the counselors. And I remember talking to Father Thomas, and I was very impressed with him. I very much liked him as a priest, admired him, looked up to him a lot. But I told him, Father Thomas, I really like so much what I see about the Legionaries of Christ. I'm just really not sure that I would want to work with boys in the future, right? And he said, well, don't worry about it. And then since then, I've worked years and years with boys, and now I'm working with young adults and students, and I absolutely love it. And so I think that God kind of gives that desire to your heart. And what fascinates me the most is just how much impact you can have in a person's life and really kind of get them on the right track or help them be on the right track. And the earlier that we discover Christ and the earlier we discover our love for Christ, well, the better off we are, and the more we're able to discover true happiness in our lives and be able to be good men and women and build strong marriages and strong families.
Your path led you to direct teams for youth work in Germany, Italy, and the United States. Can you share any particularly impactful experiences during that time of your life?
Yeah. So I would say my time leading up to ordination to the priesthood, I would really highlight 3 years that I was in Washington, D.C., and I was working with different boys' clubs there in the area. I actually would come down to Raleigh once a month as well during that period and work with some boys kind of here from Raleigh, from Cary, Apex, and the area. And I particularly remember one retreat that was actually outside of Raleigh where we were visiting a gentleman's ranch. And it was just so much fun being able to work with the boys, kind of give the talks. They would have their own activities as well. But just being able to see and to talk one-on-one and to see how each one of them was growing in his love for the Lord. These were boys, 11, 12, 13 years old. And just to see that, that power, that passion that they could have as well, and to want to be able to serve Christ. And knowing that I had that experience growing up and being able to have fellowship and other young men who wanted the same things that I did, I was just very happy to provide an atmosphere where that could happen for them.
You were ordained in 2013 in Rome.
That's right.
And began your priestly ministry in the Central American country of El Salvador, which at the time struggled with one of the highest homicide rates in the world, in good part due to high levels of gang violence. What was that experience like for you?
I love El Salvador, right? It was probably one of the biggest surprises of my life when I was told that I was going to go there. I arrived to El Salvador without knowing even one single person in the country, even the other priests. I feel like I know a lot of legionaries, but I had never run into any of the priests who were there at the time. And so, but thankfully, I was very well received from day one, and I loved it. We would do so many different things, from retreats, camps with the boys. I was working with the young adults as well. We did some really big retreats, that kind of conversion retreats that had a lot of impact. I was fascinated as well by our evangelization missions. So I was working with young people more in the city, but every year for Holy Week, we would go up to one of the mountain towns, and we would just kind of take on these two small communities. So I was doing all of the services of Holy Week twice. I would do Palm Sunday Mass in one church, do the whole procession, have the Mass with the long reading of the Gospel, finish up, and then go to the next town and do the same thing all over again. And it was just really fascinating, especially the boys and the young men that I took on these trips, on these evangelization trips. It was their spring break. And rather than going to Cancun and engaging in different type of activities, they were giving their lives to Christ during that week. And so that really was a fascinating time, as well as making some of the best friendships. And I'm still in contact with so many of my friends there, even almost every day.
You served for 3 years on the formation team at the College of Humanities of the Legionaries of Christ in Cheshire, Connecticut. What are some of the steps in the discernment process as one ponders a call to embrace the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience?
Yeah, that was a really interesting thing. So after my time in El Salvador, I was asked to help serve in the formation team there in Cheshire, Connecticut. And that was very enriching, being able to work with other priests. We really were a really great team. And then being able to work with these young men. So the ones that I was working with, they had already just made their vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And so then it's kind of the role to introduce into a practical living of that. During the novitiate, which is their first 2 years of spiritual formation, that's when they're preparing themselves for these vows. And then my role was just after that, helping them to grow deeper. And at the same time, they were studying the humanities, so English, Spanish, some of the ancient languages from the Bible, as well as math, physics, art history, being able to engage with the world. Because I think something that's very clear for us and something that we wanted to transmit to these young men is that we want to know and love Christ, but we also want to engage with the society in which we live. And that means we have to understand who our audience is, who these people are, and how we can help them. And so then after their time in humanities, they would go on to Rome for the study of philosophy and theology. So it was really a fascinating opportunity to work with these young men, and I was always very edified by them.
You also have a master's in psychology as well as a degree in philosophy.
That's right. Yeah, so thankfully during my time on the formation team in Cheshire, I did have the opportunity to do an online course and earn my master's in science and psychology from, I guess you could say, a sister institution, Divine Mercy University, outside of Washington, D.C., there in Northern Virginia. And that was fascinating. So it's not that I'm a clinical psychologist, right? I that's not my role. But being able to go through, get a better understanding of the human person, I feel like that's something that has enriched my ministry tremendously and something that I still use every day, right? Because I think that, God loves us so much. And even as we are trying to figure out our lives and trying to follow him more closely, a lot of times it's precisely in our psychology where perhaps we need a little bit of work. And so both in, working in teamwork with psychologists, which I have been able to do in different moments, as well as offering people insight into their own problems as they're preparing to lay the spiritual foundation for themselves, that's something that's been fascinating, and that I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity.
Your impressive resume also includes a stop at the Divine Mercy Clinic and Family Center in California before you arrived in Durham. What was your focus while there?
Yeah, so that was fascinating. So there we were working, there were two priests, and the other priest was the director. I was the assistant director. And there we were really working hand in hand with the therapists. And so, it's really a way of helping the whole person, And so the one hand, you would have the therapist that would be seeing people, and perhaps, they're going through and they're obviously doing a very scientific work. It's not, it's not just reflecting on the spiritual side of things, but perhaps they're meeting somebody and at some point that person maybe, as part of their process, maybe they need to go to confession. And so they come and talk to one of the priests. And then we were also very involved, especially in marriage counseling, marriage preparation, as well as spiritual direction for adults there in the area, offering retreats as well, spiritual retreats for the adults in the area. And all of that was fascinating. So I really appreciate the time that I had at the Divine Mercy Clinic. I thought I was going to be there for a lot longer. But I definitely learned a lot, and it was great teamwork with the other priest, as well as helping to bring some of the therapist interns. They had just graduated from school and they were getting their clinical hours. And so being able to help educate them or confirm them in kind of a Catholic worldview of the person at the same time that they were applying the best psychological practices that there are to offer.
Well, now that you're in Durham, what is a typical day like for you at the Duke Catholic Center?
Yeah, so I'm fascinated. I love being at the Duke Catholic Center. I love being at Duke. I think anybody who's been through there, will recognize it's a beautiful campus, even though I notice there's a lot of polarization around here because you either love Duke or hate Duke. But it really is a fascinating place to be. And then, so throughout the course of the day, I might be meeting young men or young women that have asked to talk to a priest. Maybe there's some moral dilemma that they're going through, or they want to improve their spiritual lives, get to work hand in hand as well with the Focus missionaries. So these are young adults who have just graduated from college and that are offering a period of their lives in order to evangelize other university students. Then we have Mass every day at 12 o'clock. They're in Duke Chapel, which is also beautiful and a very, very nice little benefit that we have there. We actually have the Blessed Sacrament reserved in a Protestant chapel. So that's kind of a unique situation, but something that's beautiful to see so many people taking advantage throughout the day. And then the afternoon, kind of more of those same meetings, and at least once a week, Thursday afternoon, we do something that's really neat. That's called Confessions on the Quad. So I'll take my stole, go out and sit in the middle of the quad there on campus, and students are welcome to come up, either just to talk to a priest, ask for a prayer, to ask, who are you? Like, what are you? You know, because not all of the students have the same religious background. And then also students taking advantage of going to sacramental confession. So that's something that's really fascinating. A lot of outreach and a lot of dialogue with people of different faith backgrounds, as well as strengthening those students that are trying to go deeper in their own Catholic roots.
Did you and Father Juan Jose Hernandez, who is the director of the Duke Catholic Center and also a Legionary of Christ, have any familiarity with one another prior to your arrivals in Durham? Yeah,
we've known each other for a long time. We probably were never as intensely united in the same apostolate, but we did coincide several years in Rome and have run in the same circles. And yeah, we're part of the same spiritual family, the same religious congregation. So I was very excited about the opportunity to come and work with Father Juan Jose, and he's done a great job continuing all the great work that's been done at the Duke Catholic Center over the years.
Please let him know that we'd love to have him sit down with us for an interview.
I will let him
know,
yeah, for sure.
If you're just joining us, we're with Father Nicolas Sheehy of the Duke Catholic Center, Assistant Chaplain, and you're listening to Meet the Priest on Divine Mercy Radio. Father, you're very passionate about the new evangelization. For the uninitiated, explain the concept. What are its key aspects, and how does it differ from traditional evangelization?
Yeah, well, this is a term that was really made popular by Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, or I would almost hazard to say St. John Paul the Great. But one of the things that he mentioned, and especially looking at Europe, and I had a good part of my formation that was in Europe, and so I was able to have a little bit that perspective, is that you have these places where there was a first evangelization that came through, right? You think about Europe, you think about Christian Europe. You visit, you see the great cathedrals, and even in the United States, I think you can see that there was that first evangelization. But then now you find almost a new secularism, or even so far as a new paganism. And so these societies, you could almost see them as post-Christian. So, whereas beforehand, maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago, we wouldn't have thought, you think of evangelization, you think about going out into the jungle to indigenous peoples who have never heard the gospel. And so something that St. John Paul II insisted, and I think it goes very much in line with the mission that we have as Legionaries of Christ, is we have to evangelize society, even in these societies that were traditionally Christian. And in the United States, I don't think it's a mystery for any of us that even though there is a certain Christian substrata to a lot of our society, there's so much absolute rejection of that. And so then how do we reach out to these people who aren't just, that they're not necessarily ignorant of the gospel, but they're maybe hostile to it, right? And so it takes kind of a different type of evangelization to arrive to that type of heart. And so it's something that I very much admire St. John Paul II, because I think he had a great heart for that. I think it's something that he inspired in a lot of us, that desire for this new evangelization, to evangelize, even in those, portions of the world where we should already know who Jesus is.
You know how to reach today's youth. I understand you used to have your own personal website. You're a prolific writer. Your articles and posts can be found at CatholicExchange.com. You also maintain a blog newsletter for young Catholic adults called Formation Matters on Patheos.com. You also maintain an Instagram profile where you share your thoughts on spirituality. did I miss any platforms where we can find your wisdom?
No, I think that's pretty good. And people are going to think I never get any work done. But this is kind of one of my hobbies, one of my side pursuits. Yeah.
Where do you get the inspiration for the topics you tackle?
Oh, I love talking to the young adults. I mean, probably the high point of any day at Duke is talking to a young man or woman who's coming with a particular question, right? And so even just talking to them, that's definitely where I get most of my ideas. So, I think T.S. Eliot said that good writers borrow and great writers steal. And so I think that the ideas for pretty much everything that I write, I definitely steal from other people. Maybe it's a question that a young man brings up in a time of spiritual direction or some type of a conversation or something that I'm with a group of students and somebody mentions. I love those moments. I love, trying to kind of think on my feet. And then I like later on, going back, sitting down, reflecting, and like, how would I answer this if I had a little bit more time? And so I think that's kind of where most of my articles come from.
The residents of North Carolina, particularly the Triangle area, are blessed with wonderful universities, many of them with vibrant Catholic ministries. Do you have opportunities to interact with your brethren at UNC, Chapel Hill, NC State? I know Father Joshua West at NC State is also a Legionary of Christ.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think there's definitely a particular connection with NC State because there's 2 Legionary chaplains there, and we see each other every week. So there's definitely that's something that's great. And we actually just had a joint mission trip between Duke and NC State. So we were all together 18 members of the group from Duke and NC State, and there was a priest from each of the universities as well. So there's a lot of growth. And then as well, in November, we had an awesome activity where the 3, UNC Chapel Hill, NC State, and Duke, we all had youth get together, and we had kind of a day at the park. Knights of Columbus came and made a great barbecue for us. Kids were out there playing kickball and soccer and frisbee and spike ball and all these different things. And I think there were maybe about 130 young people among the 3 different universities. So that's great. And I know now in a couple of weeks they're getting ready for a spring formal that some of the leadership, the young people themselves from the 3 universities are organizing. So I think that is a great opportunity as well, getting to know Father Tim a little bit over there at UNC, Franciscan priest, and being able to kind of pick his brain. He has a lot of experience. So something that I've been very impressed with in general in the Diocese of Raleigh is just the fraternity among the priests. And I feel there's even a special affinity for those of us who are working with university students. And so I have nothing but good things to say about the reception I've had in the diocese, and particularly with the different priests working with university students.
Given your position, you are up close and personal with this generation. What are some of the key traits that you see in today's Gen Zers that baby boomers like myself might overlook?
I have a lot of hope. I mean, I'm so impressed with these young men and women. I think that there's definitely, I see a very entrepreneurial spirit. I think I'm also blessed being at Duke. I mean, these are obviously young men and women that have been very good at preparing themselves for their futures. But I just see this desire really to do great things. Even last week that I was on missions in Mexico with several of them, just seeing the spirit of service, hard work. We were moving bricks, breaking rocks, putting down a foundation. We were working on building a school there in kind of an underprivileged area. And I just saw this tremendous spirit of self-giving. And that's something that I've seen a lot. I see a lot of curiosity, like particularly with faith questions. And there's even been some articles that have come out in the last year that talks about kind of a revival or a reawakening of spiritual curiosity among young people. It's something that I definitely see. At the Duke Catholic Center, thankfully we have a lot of young men and women that are very active. And one of the frequent conversations is, Father, I have this friend that I'm bringing to Mass, and he has these questions. What can I say? Or, Father, my roommate, she is really interested in the Catholic faith. Can we come and sit down and talk? So sometimes it'll be the 3 of us, me, the young woman who's more involved at the Duke Catholic Center, and then her friend. And we're just kind of talking things through. So I definitely see the spiritual curiosity. And then, there's this desire. I think they want their lives to matter. And I think that's part of why there's also this spiritual awakening.
Well, it's no secret that a lot of people leave the faith in college. In your experience, what can be done to minimize the fallout?
Well, I think that, faith is really important. And maybe that sounds like a very simple answer. But if we don't believe that Jesus Christ is who he is, we're wasting our time, And so I think, we do everything we can in order to communicate that. And hopefully the students do appreciate that. But then I would say that has to come hand in hand with a sense of community, And I think that's something that is so tremendously important. And one of the things I see is so many students that begin to bring their friends to Mass. Because actually one thing that's neat is every week we have to make an announcement about communion, that it's for practicing Catholics. Because we have so many people visiting that are not practicing Catholics. And there are and many that aren't Catholic at all. And so to be able to explain to them that the Eucharist is something so special that it is reserved to practicing Catholics. But I think that finding that sense of community is going to be something that's really important to stay rooted in the faith. I think it's one of the kind of the core messages that we have for the students as well. Just as we have the community here, at the Duke Catholic Center, well, that's something that they want to continue to foster and look for later on when they graduate and they move on to more of a life of being young adults, that we need to foster that community. I look at some of the other, like even some of the mega churches or some of the evangelical churches, and they're so welcoming. And a lot of times when we go to a Catholic church, it's almost like you have to force your way in, right? We had a great activity, or at Duke, we have the tradition of a great activity at the beginning of the fall semester, which is called Feast Off East. So we invite the incoming first-year students with their families, and we just throw this big party for them, And so it's a reception, and it's a way of getting them to know where the Catholic Center is, letting them know about the different activities we have. But I remember witnessing this for the first time last August, and I was very impressed. But then I also said, this is the best you're going to be treated, or in my own mind, I said, this is the best they're going to be treated coming to a new Catholic church, right? And so I think we need to do a better job of really being welcoming to those who are arriving, because so often you can come, feel really alone, feel out of place, and it can be hard to interpret what's going on at Catholic Mass. It can be hard to break into a Catholic community. And so I think we have to be very aware of that, be very welcoming, so that people can, experience community and then experience that connection with Jesus Christ.
I can't imagine you have much free time, but when you do, how do you like to spend it?
Well, I'd like to have a little bit more of it, that's for sure. So one hobby I was able to pick up when I was out in Los Angeles, the other priest was the director of the clinic, and myself, we would do a lot of cycling. And so I am trying to do that here as well, though it's been a little bit harder with the schedule and with the way the roads are around here. They're not as friendly to cyclists.
Certainly not on campus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I do really enjoy road cycling.
I'm curious how many languages you have familiarity with.
So I speak 4 languages. My parents like to joke. They say that, when Nick joined the Legionaries, he spoke 1 language well. Now he speaks 4 languages poorly.
In case you are just joining us, this is Divine Mercy Radio, Meet the Priest. Our guest today is the Assistant Chaplain at Duke Catholic Center, Father Nicolas Sheehy. Father, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your love of the game of baseball. The season's getting ready to start. How did you develop a love for the San Diego Padres?
Well, I grew up in San Diego. My dad pitched fast-pitch softball, so I actually remember a lot of weekends growing up, traveling around, watching him play. And then, baseball was kind of always part of the family tradition. Now, I'm not the best baseball player. I'm very much a baseball fan. My brothers were all better than me at baseball, and yes, I will say that publicly, although maybe not to their faces. And so I just always really loved it. San Diego Padres was definitely always the team that I cared about the most. This offseason's been a little painful because the Dodgers, who were already very good have just gotten better. So we'll see what happens. I think that might actually inspire me to watch a little more college baseball this year. We'll see. I'm very excited about Duke. It looks like we have a good team. But yeah, baseball, I just think it's kind of the perfect sport. It has its own pace. It's exciting. It's something that's tremendously challenging, something that for me brings back so many good memories. And something that I really am passionate about. And it's funny, like pretty much any baseball movie will make me cry. I really get into the story. I really love it. And it's just, it's something that I enjoy deeply. I get it if people don't like it, and I've lived in different countries and been with people that don't have the same understanding of the game. But if the bug has bit you, there's no way of getting away from baseball.
I've got to ask you, do you think the Dodgers are ruining baseball with the obscene amounts of money that they're spending on acquiring talent?
Well, I don't know. The Yankees did it first, right? So, I don't know. I wouldn't look at it quite so much like that. I think that there probably would have to be some other solutions. But I don't know. I'm not too negative on the Dodgers, which one of my brothers will be really upset if he hears that. I'm definitely a Padres fan and want them to win always. But, I think there's something exciting. And David can beat Goliath. So as good as the Dodgers may get, and actually last year, even though the Dodgers had the best team in the MLB, the Padres did beat them during the season. They won the majority of the games. We lost in the playoffs, but we did pretty well during the season. So even though they're there, somebody can get their number and knock them out. So I'm not afraid that they're going to win every World Series, even though they are definitely spending the most money per win.
Padres are fielding a competitive team this year. Hopefully they'll
we hope so.
Give the Dodgers a run for their money. And you are right about Duke baseball. Chris Pollard's done an excellent job over there building a first-class program. And staying with the sports theme, Duke obviously has a world-class and world-famous basketball program. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you in your time there, have you encountered players in the Catholic Center?
Well, they're always welcome, right? So no, we have a lot of the Division I athletes are coming to Mass and will even participate in the Bible studies. But no, none of the current team is tremendously active at the DCC yet. But hopefully soon.
You have already managed to accomplish so much. If you had total control over your next destination and role, where would we find you and what would you be doing?
Well, I hope to be at Duke for a long time, right? And I'm very fascinated with that. And I'm going to almost have to refuse to answer the question because I've learned to not make too many plans for my life. I've been surprised enough times. And I think we're always happiest there where God wants us. And that's where I really try to do my best and always give myself 100%. And then at the end of the day, our final destination is heaven. And as long as I make it there, the rest of it's pretty secondary.
If someone should find themselves over in Durham, I understand the Catholic Center has 2 locations, one on East Campus and one on West Campus.
That's correct. Yeah, so for the students on East Campus, we're there right across the road on Buchanan, and so very easy to find. And then on West Campus, we're in the Page offices, so right next to Duke Chapel, also relatively easy to find. And then every Sunday, we have Mass at 11 in Goodson Chapel in the Divinity School, and then at 8 p.m. in Duke Chapel. And right now, for the rest of Lent, we're also going to add a 9 a.m. Mass at Goodson Chapel. Because thankfully, we've had overflow crowds all throughout the year, and so we wanted to add on an extra Mass at least during Lent.
Do you hope to one day house everything under one roof like NC State has recently been able to accomplish with the Doggett Center?
Well, I'm really excited for Father Joshua and Father Daniel and so many that have contributed to making this reality of the Doggett Center come true. I think at Duke that we're tremendously privileged to be able to work hand in hand with the university. There's something very special about being able to have Mass every Sunday at Duke Chapel. It's a gorgeous space. Obviously there would be something to be said for having a specifically Catholic space. But I really like working with the university, and so I wouldn't necessarily say that the vision is to move away from that. I think that we want to continue to develop, but also I think being there in the middle of things also brings to light a little bit the missionary nature that we have on campus as well.
Online, you can find the Duke Catholic Center at catholic.duke.edu. Thank you to our special guest today, Father Nicolas Sheehy of the Duke Catholic Center. That concludes another episode of Meet the Priest. I am your host, Mark Baratta. Thank you for listening to Catholic 540 Divine Mercy Radio.